Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm Andrew Musgrove, joined by our chief Newcastle United writer, Lee Ryder, and we come to you this afternoon on the back of the news that Amanda Staveley and Mehrdad Ghodoussi, co-owners of Newcastle United, will leave the club after nearly 3 years. And it's understood that their 6% share, which started out at 10, will be sold on to either the PIF or the Reuben brothers. Huge news this afternoon. Lee, we'll dive into the details in a moment, but just give us your initial reaction to the news that Staveley and Ghodoussi will no longer be part of Newcastle United.
Yeah, I think it was always a day that was going to arrive, because I think when Amanda Staveley first sort of set foot in St James's Park back in 2017, when she was a guest of Rafa Benitez, no less, that moment was her brokering a deal for Newcastle United, which she'd done previously with great success, getting Manchester City up and running. And this was very similar. So I think there was always a feeling that this day would come, and basically her role would change gradually, which it has. So I'm not completely sitting here absolutely shocked. It's not a shock as big a shock as Kevin Keegan leaving or Mike Ashley taking over the club or anything like that, or the takeover itself. It's not really on that level, because one day this was always going to come. But probably a little bit of sadness within the fan base that this has happened today.
Yeah, it always felt like Amanda Staveley would be the first one to leave. As you say, she led the takeover, led the buyout from Mike Ashley. Took months to finally get approval, but finally in October 2021, it was signed off by the Premier League. And we all remember the scenes outside of St James's Park, but you always felt like her role was going to be short-term in terms of how long she'd stay on Tyneside, build the foundations for Newcastle United to become a successful club. And no one can argue over the last couple of seasons that the foundations haven't started to be laid. Really interesting, the reaction that's come over social media. We'll go back, Lee, actually, to the beginning when Amanda Staveley first came on the scene. As you mentioned there, she was a guest at the game against Liverpool. She tried 3 times to buy the club in 2017. And I think the reaction from most people has been along the lines of she never gave up. And that's going to really be her legacy, that she always wanted to buy Newcastle United, always wanted to be a custodian of the club and could see the potential, whereas Mike Ashley just couldn't. And that's probably the legacy that she'll leave the club with.
Yeah, and I think at the time where Mike Ashley left the club, I think what it needed was, somebody with a sort of nice attitude to come in and, talk to the fan base. If you remember going back to that day where the press was sort of encamped outside Jesmond Hotel, it was quickly apparent that things were going to be different, that they were going to communicate with the media. We were invited into a suite to speak to Amanda Staveley and talk about the ambition of the club, talk about the club being taken over. If you remember, they were outside outside the hotel. They wanted to be outside the stadium, by the way, but I think the security wouldn't let them. But they were talking to supporters outside the hotel. They were giving them their sort of version of events, and communication, was starting to look up a little bit. I mean, since then there's been a little bit more tension around the club after what happened last season. The success rate wasn't as rapid as it was the year before, but ultimately I think change was going to be inevitable, and we're now starting to see that.
And there's been hints that this was coming, as you say. It was always going to happen one day, but their stake in the club was at 10%. It is now it's 6%. The Reubens bought 4% of it up not too long ago. And then there was a quote that she gave to The Athletic earlier in the year, or what Mehrdad Ghodoussi did. And he said, "We know our limitations. We are business people, but we are smart business people. We know we have to build a solid team at Newcastle that's going to drive the business and the football." Kind of maybe just laying the groundwork for that exit whenever it has come. It has come now. Do we understand that's going to happen imminently, Lee? Do we think it's going to happen, before the season kicks off?
Well, I think everything that has been done now, from sort of Riyadh end. They don't rush into big decisions. They take their time and they're very calm business people. They wait and they seek advice. And basically, this situation, I think will be another process of calm judgment. And they're in control. They always had 80%. It looks like that's going to be a little bit more now. So I think the sort of PIF involvement will be calm. And you've got Paul Mitchell in there now. Darren Eales remains at the club. They'll probably leave it to people on the ground at St James's Park before we see any big statements.
Yeah, we are waiting for official confirmation, but I'm sure when it does come that we will see Amanda Staveley and Mehrdad Ghodoussi, no doubt, paraded on the pitch within the new season to say goodbye to the fan base. And as I said, the reaction's been as expected, a little bit emotional, because fans just never thought the day would come when their club would be taken over, and it got taken over by ambitious owners, which was the kind of the sweetener of the deal. When you, Lee, you met Amanda Staveley for the first time up in Jesmond Dean House. I mean, the very fact that she persisted with the buyout for a start shows you just how passionate she was about the club and what she could see about its potential and what it could achieve. But what did you get from her the first time you met her, just in terms of that kind of passion?
Yeah, I mean, the passion. Anybody who sticks at a takeover for 4 years, their passion can't be questioned. But it's not just that. It's trying to find the funds to move what looked like somebody who didn't want to budge. It felt like Mike Ashley was going to be here forever, and it felt like they weren't going to be able to get that tank off the drive, to coin his famous phrase about parking tanks. And when Amanda Staveley sat down, she was, basically very nice in terms of wanting to, she had a good sort of manner around her. But I think as things went on, it became obvious that she could say less and less at the football club. We didn't see a huge spate of interviews. There were invites into the boardroom. We went up there a couple of times to speak to Amanda Staveley on and off the record. And I think basically it became obvious that Newcastle were looking to bring in these figureheads. And you, as I've mentioned there, you've got Darren Eales, who did a big interview in January. We haven't heard much since then, when he basically said any player could be sold. And that certainly has proved to be the case with Minter and Elliot Anderson in the last couple of weeks. We'll have to wait and see if there's going to be an even bigger shockwave with some of the players that we've seen linked with moves. We don't know what's going to happen entirely on that. And then obviously you've got Paul Mitchell there coming in, and what a start for him that he sees two huge boardroom figures suddenly no longer on the scene. So there's lots that can still unfold. I think it's going to be a bit of time of uncertainty, but the stability will be needed, as you say, because the season is just around the corner now.
It's interesting you mentioned there the likes of Darren Eales, Paul Mitchell, Peter Silverstone, and then also the fact that any big decisions, you have to go to Riyadh to get them signed off. Was it a case, you think, of too many people in the boardroom, too many maybe opinions, and unfortunately for Amanda Staveley, Mehrdad Ghodoussi, it's those two who've been, who are set to go. Too many cooks is the expression that I've seen bandied about. Do you think that was the case?
I mean, without having taken a place in a board meeting, it is difficult to say because football clubs and huge businesses are made up. They're made up of absolutely a lot of figureheads, and it's been the same at Newcastle. We've seen the documentary, how many people were featured on that, and there were so many. But ultimately, I think you do need strong leadership. I think we will see strong leadership. But look, Newcastle didn't get in the Champions League last season. They didn't win anything last season. They unfortunately finished 7th. They didn't even get into a European place. If you I think the best thing you can go back to is the comments from the chairman when he said he wants to be number one, and he won't rest at doing that until he gets there. So I think until Newcastle become this huge force, then I think everybody's going to be fighting for positions there.
It's interesting because as much as we say it's not a total shock, there's been little hints when you piece everything together like a jigsaw puzzle. But only 6 days ago, Amanda Staveley on Instagram wrote, "I just wanted to thank our wonderful community for all the lovely messages and emails of support we've received recently. I wish we could respond personally to everyone. The new season is full of promise for Newcastle United, and we don't have long to wait." So clearly, she's looking forward to the new season. I mean, there's nothing there to suggest that it has come out of the blue for her. It's maybe been, something that's been coming down the line for quite a while. But clearly, Lee, that message in isolation, she is looking forward to what the new season holds.
Well, I think all we can do is try and form an opinion on that. And I think you'll be the same as me on this, in that doesn't sound like a person who wants to depart the football club. And we'd seen that statement as well earlier in the year with the company's house statements. So that suggests that they had a vision to still be at Newcastle in the 24-25 season. Obviously, until we get things on the record and statements, it's hard to come to a thorough conclusion on it. But just going off what you just said there, then that sounds like somebody who wants to remain at the football club, and I haven't seen any evidence against that so far. But again, we'll have to wait and see. It's going to be an interesting summer, and we've still got all the fallout from England still to come, and who knows what might happen there, because I certainly think Eddie Howe could be on the FA's wish list.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think there is certain opinion when it comes to Eddie Howe that maybe Amanda Staveley and Mehrdad Ghodoussi offered some sort of buffer to the PIF potentially. And I've seen some people ask whether this removes a layer of protection for Eddie Howe, if things don't go well in the opening 10, 12 games of the season. And also, Lee, I mean, there's, Amanda Staveley was the voice. She was the face of Newcastle United. And there's also concerns that I've seen raised about potential communication as well. Will there be a vacuum with their exits?
We have to, sit and wait. I think Darren Eales has been the spokesman for the club in the last 12 months. We sat down with him at the training ground last summer. I sat down with him in the United States when Newcastle were on tour, and we spoke to him over a Zoom call in January when the revelation that Newcastle were not going to stand in anyone's way if they wanted to buy players from the club. And that's, again, it's proved to be the case. So as much as we see that Eddie Howe wants to basically hold on to certain players, what's happened in the boardroom suggests otherwise. And I think while some Newcastle fans might see the media reports as kind of rocking the boat, but I'm looking at it as a Newcastle supporter myself, as well as the job that I'm doing. And I've lived in a time where if the ambition isn't there, then the big names leave, and you can go back to Gascoigne, you can go back to Chris Waddle, Peter Beardsley. They all left because the ambition wasn't there. Andy Carroll, another one, someone I know well, left the club because they didn't want to offer him an extended contract. They weren't pursuing bigger names to play alongside him. So, you could go back to Cabaye, people like that. There's so many examples of it. And that's why no one could ever sit tight and say Anthony Gordon's definitely going to stay, Isak's definitely going to stay, or Bruno's definitely going to stay, because it does feel like there's another potential exit in Newcastle this summer.
Yeah, one to watch on the transfer fronts. And I mean, in that time at Newcastle, Lee, Amanda Staveley, she did play a role in talking to players, potential arrivals. We saw the Amazon documentary where she was very keen for for Anthony Gordon. But with Paul Mitchell coming in and maybe taking a bit more of a hands-on approach when it comes to negotiations and talking to players, and you've mentioned that Darren Neal's also been more of the spokesperson for the club in the last year or so. The Monastery's role has been watered down slightly over the last 12 months, I think it's fair to say. I think that's also played into the decision, and they've gone around, they've looked around and said, well, actually, we've got Darren Neal's doing this, we've got Paul Mitchell doing this, we've got Peter Silverstone doing this, Steve Nixon can do this. There isn't really a set rule for you two here. Now might be the time, while things are still looking relatively rosy despite not getting European football, for you to go on into the sunset.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mention all the people that are involved there, because, and without being critical, Newcastle still end up in that position where they had to sell two players they didn't really want to sell, especially Elliot Anderson, who could go on and become an absolute superstar. So could Minter. They could both become huge players elsewhere. And that's not really the position a competitive football club would find themselves in. It's like Manchester City at the moment. They wouldn't sell Phil Foden at the moment because he's in that position. Well, in a couple of years' time, Elliot Anderson could be right up there, and he's now going to be at Nottingham Forest. So you never know with players. Sometimes they go on and become superstars. Sometimes they don't. They've got that opportunity at their feet, and it's whether they take it or not. So those sales were questionable. Desperation, yes, and potentially worse to come. We'll have to wait and see.
Monastery reportedly played a role in the Minter sale, but sure, she's been hands-on right until this news has been confirmed. She again had a role in persuading Joe Linton to sign an extended deal. She's got a really good relationship with the players. That emotional connection we saw when Newcastle qualified for the Champions League, and that game against Leicester City, and she went over to Nick Pope, and there's a great image that our photographer Ian Buey got of her just kind of looking so relieved, and Nick Pope sharing the same expression. A really good connection on a personal level with these players. That is going to be something that's going to be hard to replace, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. And from their point of view, they'll probably, when the dust settles, they'll look back on this hopefully as three enjoyable years being at the forefront of running a major football club. And I think, generally speaking, they've done a good job, especially given that they are actually financial people. They're not football people, but they've gone to the right people and got the right advice at the right time. So, yeah, I think that they can reflect on it as they've done a good job, but ultimately, it's the same thing. Nobody is ever bigger than the football club, and that's always been like that. Doesn't matter about if it's players, managers, owners, directors. The football club will always stand at the top of that hill, and for whoever is in charge, they know that, as you've mentioned earlier on this podcast, they're custodians, and I think that they've always actually said that on the record, that they'll do their best while they're here. And look, I think you've got to look. Some people would call them small wins. I would call them big wins or clever wins. Stuff like bringing Adidas back, changing the sign on the stands, bringing the Shearer statue back. Well, it was not bringing it back, but getting it over the wall, getting Shearers back on the bar. All these little things, or so-called little things, turn into one big thing, and it's the football club becomes a place people want to be again. And I think they'll always be the people that sort of drove that back. So congratulations to them. And as you say, it'd be nice if they do get some kind of opportunity to say goodbye.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, cleaning the windows was another thing, and there's loads of little things, as you say, which actually meant quite a lot to Newcastle United fans, which no doubt they were the driving force behind it. I mean, Amanda Staveley's impact at the women's side as well. I mean, back-to-back promotions, investment going in there. She's been the driving force behind that. And I always say when I speak about the women's side, Lee, is that it would be very easy for her to come in and say, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then do it half-heartedly, or not meet her own words. But what she's actually done is she's gone above and beyond. And we have to hope that support continues even though her exit is on the cards, because the inspiration that gives to young girls to see their football club and the back-to-back promotions, Becky Langley doing a fantastic job. It's something you can't really put a value on.
Yeah, I mean, emotions will be running high on that side of the football department, because that has been completely transformed from, an unloved section of the football club to a really ambitious one. A couple of signings in the last few days have underlined that. How many fans turned up at St James's Park? 35,000 fans to watch the women play. I was there for the first big one against Alnwick, and it was a fantastic occasion, lovely atmosphere around it, and one where young people could go there and they didn't feel under any kind of, there wasn't anything to be scared of. It was just a nice atmosphere, and they bought that at the football club. So well done on that one as well, because that's a huge thing. And what they've done is they've left a big legacy, especially with that side of it. And as I say, congratulations to them for that.
I'll get you to sign off in a moment on what their legacy is, in your opinion, Lee. But what happens next? Because it is a big summer for Newcastle United. They need some serious investment in the first team squad. St James's Park is still up for discussion with a feasibility survey, waiting on those results. The stack's been built. Adidas is back. There's a lot of things that are happening or need to happen over the next few months. And you would think Amanda Staveley and Mehrdad Ghodoussi would play quite a big role in those decisions. And it now looks like they're going to go. That just maybe puts a bit more pressure on Darren Eales and Peter Silverstone and Paul Mitchell to do their role.
Yeah, I mean, the questions will surely be answered, whether it's gradually or sooner, I don't know. But at the minute, Newcastle saying no comments, and I would expect that to change, because such a big development can't be ignored. We did grow used to that, of course, under Mike Ashley. He used to do his annual interview with Sky Sports. But let's see what happens. I think it's one where the fans will be looking for some answers on this, and the next few days will be pivotal to that, I guess.
We'll wait for that official confirmation when hopefully we start to get some of the answers to your questions. Lee, what is the legacy then of Amanda Staveley and Mehrdad Ghodoussi at Newcastle United?
Well, I think the legacy is that they allowed people to dream again, and that's for me, as I say, I'm speaking as a supporter as well, and to allow fans to wake up every morning and be positive about the football club and the community, because it's a football city, it's a football mad city, and to allow people to have nice thoughts each day is something that had been harshly taken away from the previous regime, who just left the club not in a good state. We all know what had happened under Mike Ashley. Will not rake over that kind of ground, but I think really, if Newcastle fans, are going to say anything to them, it'll probably be a big thank you. And they helped the takeover go through. They stabilised the club. They allowed people to dream again. The stadium is in a better place than it was when they took over 3 years ago. So, as I say, it's a congratulations from most supporters.
Yeah, they allowed fans to fall back in love with their club, and I think that's as good as we can ask for. They made them feel part of it again, and made them feel like the club was as important to the owners as it is to the fan base, which is what we wanted with new owners. And a Champions League qualification, Champions League campaign, and a cup final, Lee, that's not a bad achievement list. We would have loved to have a cup been lifted, but it wasn't to be. But still, not a bad couple of markers in under 3 years of your co-ownership. So that's it, ladies and gents. Amanda Staveley and Mehrdad Ghodoussi set to leave Newcastle United with their remaining 6% stake to go to either the Public Investment Fund or the Reuben brothers. Thanks to Lee for popping on the podcast and sharing his insight into this breaking news. It's going to be a busy couple of days as we wait for official confirmation. But for myself and Lee, we'll see you guys very soon.